So today I'm delighted to welcome this morning Sarah Fotheringham and Jenny Watts from Gloucestershire Action for Refugees and Asylum Seekers, GARAS for short. Good morning, Sarah, and good morning to you, Jenny. They are also one of our partners and a really, really good partner too. Now, Sarah has vast experience of working with refugees and asylum seekers and navigating the path through the right to work processes and systems. And Jenny is our resident expert on all things related to the new EU right to work system. Before I just hand over to Sarah, just to say questions, if you could put your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom or the chat box, whichever's easier for you, and we'll pick your questions up at the end of the presentation. I hope that's okay. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Sarah. Thank you.
Hello. Great. Well, this is my first experience of doing a webinar, so hopefully it'll be an enlightening one for you all. Right, so yes, I'm working in the GEM project as a navigator developer for GARAS, and we only do working with refugees and asylum seekers. So yeah, let's have the next slide. So I wanted to be clear about one thing just as we start, the difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee and who can and can't work. There's a lot about it in the news, of course, as everybody knows, but asylum seekers are seeking asylum. They haven't got their status, they have very limited rights, and they don't have the right to work apart from in certain circumstances. Refugees have the right to work. They have the same rights as you and me. Apart from, as I just discovered recently, they cannot work in the armed forces. I tried to apply for somebody to work in the armed forces. They cannot work in that area, and they cannot get a job in the Cheltenham intelligence offices either. So all refugees now will get a BRP, which is a biometric residence permit, and it will show. We'll show you some cards a bit later. At the bottom, it will say work permitted. So it's very clear that they can work or that they can't work. It'll say work permitted. We'll have a look at some cards in a minute. So just to be clear, prior to 2008, refugees were not allocated BRPs. They didn't exist. They would have had a letter or immigration status document to show that they can work. Most now will have applied for and received a BRP or a passport. There's loads of support out there. There's loads of websites, obviously, that you can link in to check if somebody can work, and we'll have a look at some of those in a bit. So the BRP, the famous biometric residence permit, it is the size of a kind of driver's license, and it's got various bits of information on it. That is gold dust. You don't want to lose that. It shows you what you can and can't do, and shows, more importantly, what employers need to see. They're going to be phasing that out, I hear. So soon you will be only able to check if somebody is able to work through the computer, through the internet system, through links. There's another card called the ARC card. That's an application registration card. Now, mostly asylum seekers have that. Again, it will look a little bit like a driver's license card, and again, it will say underneath it various different bits of information that's useful for employers, including, it might say, no public funds or NRPF, which means that individual has not got recourse to claiming any benefits or going on any courses or doing anything which is funded by public funds. The SOL list, a shortage occupation list, that's where asylum seekers can sometimes work. And that is for trades and businesses that we are having trouble recruiting in. Now, originally it was ballerinas, chemists, all kinds of highly trained individuals. Now I understand it is also for chefs. interestingly or not. So we're just going to have a look at the first link, if we can just have a look at that properly. Yeah, I just want to go down and just have a look at that BRP card for you. So if we just zoom in, I can't see it entirely properly. Great, that's brilliant. So obviously this individual, you've got her name, you've got a date permitted, which is 2017. That card runs out, and when it started, 2014. She's on a tier 4 general student leave to remain. Now, the tier structure is a different animal altogether, and we at GARAS don't deal very much with that. So if you're interested in the tier system, you'll have to go onto the internet and look that up yourself, because that is usually for employers who are wanting to bring people over, or for students, in this case, Nadia Williams. The two bits that are really interesting is the leave to remain bit, and also the work permitted. She's permitted to work a certain amount of hours. Those are the areas that you really need to look at as an employer. And if we go down, so on the back of the card, you will see, hopefully, move it, yeah, you will see some more information, really useful information, where she's from, date of birth, and the national insurance number. So BRP cards, and the ARC card will look the same as that. If we go back up the screen again, the ARC card will look the same as that, except where it says work permitted, you will have no recourse to public funds or the SOL list. So that's just a really useful, totally valid piece of kit that our refugees will be having. Okay, so we just go back to the presentation again then. And moving on, yeah. So the other little element that's really tricky and really important to be aware of is this indefinite leave to remain, moving from leave to remain. So in my experience, we've been working with the Syrian resettlement project, and a lot of those refugees came over immediately with leave to remain, which allowed them to remain for 5 years. Now this is now moving on, and the Home Office is quite busy, like all of us, and they have now generated a document that says they're unlikely, that you're unlikely to be given your status immediately. It might take up to six months. But if you have made an application for your indefinite leave to remain, which is the next section on from leave to remain, then you are allowed to work. And the process of that is that you get given an application, you fill in the application, and you get given a UK IV number. And that will be at the top of the paperwork. And that is what you have to put in as an employer. That is what you put into the links to follow through and discover that that person is allowed to work. That you will be presented with by an individual who, by an individual who has made an application for their indefinite leave to remain. And this is the UK V1 reference number that you will be putting into the links, and up will come a piece of information that says this individual has got the right to work. Okay, if I cancel that now, and if you could just go back to the slides then again, Jenny will be quick here. I just want to have a little look through. The indefinite leave to remain is really important. Many people have made an application. They are allowed to work. We actually will support you finding that out, working that out. And we also have letters that we send out to employers who are concerned about this. And we can make sure that you can get your individual into work. So let's just have a quick look on the job applicant right to work link. these are all really useful, and hopefully we'll be giving you these out afterwards. These are the go-to places to check out, and you basically just have to go through the system. If you go right down to the bottom, yeah, there's some information on there. Just go off a bit again. Right, I should have done this myself, really. Okay, stop. Okay, right. What I'm going to say is that go onto these links and have a look through, checking your applicant's original documentation, putting in that UKV1 number if necessary, obviously keeping copies of all the relevant documents that you need. And that will take you through the whole system, and you'll be able to check that the individual has got right to work. Okay, let's just go and have a look at some of those other links. I'm aware time is ticking already. Yeah, so down here, this is really interesting. If you wait there, if you have been given permission to work as part of another form of leave, then as long as your application for asylum was made in time, you will usually be allowed to continue to work. Usually you will be allowed to continue to work. So I just wanted to give you that link there. Okay, and let's have a look at another link. Shortage of occupation. Yeah, I don't know if we can make this any bigger, but this is your shortage of occupation list. And it is changing all the time because of COVID, because of Brexit. There's an awful lot of pressures that have come in now for employers. And I can completely empathise with trying to struggle to get people into work. And this is a really great go-to list. Physicists, electronic engineers, design and development engineers, IT business there. I was going to say vegetarians, no, veterinarians, all jobs. Yeah, go-to list. We're going to put all these links up, really useful. Graphic designer. I don't think we saw a chef in that particular one. Okay, let's just have a quick look at the last one then. Oh, not the last one. This was actually for volunteering. Now, we've had a question recently about whether an asylum seeker can volunteer. They can. Again, there's a link in my slides that will give you evidence of this. Now, we never needed that before, but now employers, volunteer organisations are wanting asylum seekers to prove that they can volunteer, and we'll be able to provide you with that as well. This tells you asylum seeker volunteering legislation. Down there, it will say that they can volunteer anyway. So interesting, everything is tightening up. People are obviously concerned and worried about employing people when they don't have a right to work. If you have concerns or worries, come back to GARAS and we will try and sort that out. Okay, that's enough from me. Over to Jenny.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I am going to tell you now about the EU settlement scheme and how Brexit now affects employers of EU citizens. If I can ask you, don't post any questions in the chat until after I finish, because hopefully I will cover all of your questions, hopefully. So now that Brexit has happened, EU citizens need to apply to continue to live, work and study in the UK. As I go through this presentation, I want you to think through your employees and those people that you know, and just think if you have anyone from the EU, because if you do, this will probably apply to them. I'm going to start by giving you a bit of basic background on the EU settlement scheme. Don't make notes, just kind of let this wash over you, because for the most part, you don't need to know the detail. I just want to give you a brief overview. So first up, who should apply? All EU citizens, all EEA citizens, that's the European Economic Area, and all Swiss citizens. Hopefully we can send you a list, we can send you these slides, because That is the list of countries in the EU, and that's the extra EEA member states, and then obviously Switzerland as well. Ireland is underlined because if you're Irish, you don't have to apply, but you can. That's a different sort of question. So if you employ anyone from Ireland, not Northern Ireland, obviously, you can continue to check their eligibility to work as you did before. Also, anyone from the EU, EEA and Swiss citizens and their dependents, so it could be family members, children, babies, and so on. So they can be from other countries. It doesn't matter how long they have lived in the UK for. It sounds like I'm shouting, so it doesn't matter how long they've lived in the UK for. They need to apply. It's really, really important that people apply unless they already hold British citizenship. So why do people need to apply? Well, it's to enable them to continue to live, work and study in the UK, to keep access to the benefits and welfare systems, pensions and the NHS and so on. If they don't apply, they may well find themselves in the country illegally. And that would obviously have a huge knock-on effect for you as their employer. There are many negatives to not applying, including the one that I've underlined and highlighted here, because that is what is applicable to you guys as employers. They will be banned from working and unable to have a bank account in the UK. So what is the scheme? Well, first up, it's an online application to receive settled or pre-settled status. You don't necessarily need to know all of this. I just thought it'd be helpful to do a bit of jargon busting. Settled status is basically indefinite leave to remain. You can stay in the country, you can live. It's for those who have lived here already for 5 or more years, and there is no end date, it's indefinite. Pre-settled status is like the leave to remain that Sarah just talked about, and that's for those who lived in the UK for at least 1 day and up to 5 years, and it is a 5-year limit on it. You can apply, you can stay in the country for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, you would then convert it into settled status, very much like the leave to remain and indefinite leave to remain. So when? Wow, that's a good question. It was by 30th of June. All applications now are late applications. So if people have not yet applied, they are currently in the UK illegally, they need to apply. I can't stress how important, stress enough how important it is they apply. The late application system is open indefinitely, but you have to have a good reason for why you haven't yet applied. It's free to apply, and if people need help or advice, we can give that for free too. So that's a very brief bit of background as to what the scheme is. Now for the bit that you need to know. How does it affect employers? So the first thing to consider is the share code. To prove their right to work in the UK, EU citizens need to generate a share code from this website. When they've received their status, the email that they received gave details of this website. You can tell them just to type into Google view and prove and then click on the top link because they're viewing their status and they're proving their status, and then just click on the top link. They will need the ID document they applied with, so an ID card or a passport, depending on how they applied, and then the mobile or email that they also used, because they'll get a security code through that. And it's the green button. If I quickly pop on this, I'm not sure if it goes, there's a green button. You just click on the green button, it's always the green button. So for you guys, they follow the green buttons and they'll eventually get to a page that generates a 10-digit share code. For you guys, you need to take that 10-digit share code and use this website to check the person's right to work. I am going to show you a very quick little video. I'm going to stop it part way through to say something else, then we'll finish watching it. It's about 2 minutes long.
Because of Brexit, hiring people with status under the EU settlement scheme will require a new right to work check. This is a guide on how to do it with respect for the law and for staff. As an employer, the first thing to remember is that the EU settlement scheme applies to a whole range of people. This includes EU citizens with IDs issued by an EU country, but also their family members, whose passports may be issued by a country anywhere in the world. Here's how you conduct the right to work checks. Open a web browser and look up Check Right to Work. From the government page, choose the option to check the applicant's right to work online. then it's a simple step-by-step process. First, enter the applicant's share code. We've explained how they can generate it in a different video. Then enter their date of birth. You will see a confirmation of their name and right to work. Check that the picture matches the applicant, then file a copy of the online confirmation and store it safely. You will need it for the duration of their employment and 2 years later. It's important to remember that some people may not have received a decision.
I'm just going to pause it there quickly while I say there are a few instances where people won't be able to generate a share code. Some people haven't yet received their status. As Sarah said, the Home Office are very busy and therefore delayed. If they've received a certificate of application and they applied before June, they can still get a share code. If they applied after the deadline and they're waiting for their status, they cannot generate a share code. So I'll show you in a minute what they can do. Okay, so let's go on. So this lady will mention that anyway.
On their EUSS application yet at the time that they apply for a job. This does not mean that they don't have a right to work, and you can still check it by using the employer checking service. Before you start, you'll need their date of birth, nationality and Home Office reference number, which can be found in their certificate of application. When it comes to immigration, there's a lot at stake, but remember that as an employer, you have to abide by the laws of immigration, employment and equality. Imposing excessive requirements that single out or penalise EU nationals who work or who want to work for you is a form of discrimination that carries serious consequences. So stay informed. Read the latest Home Office guidance and call the employer helpline, or get in touch with our team for a training. All proceeds fund our employment rights clinics, where our advisors support vulnerable workers challenging exploitation.
As I said, if an employee is unable to generate a share code, then that's the website there. And if we send out these slides later, then you can see there how you do that. So I've got some questions now that I am going to ask and then answer. It's okay. The first one, these are hopefully questions that you are already thinking of, and hopefully as I answer them now, that will help you. So what if someone was already working for my organisation before the 30th of June 2021? You don't need to do retrospective checks. It's fine, they can just keep working for you. If you discover they have not yet applied, make sure they do so immediately. If they've got a machine readable ID card, ID documents or a passport or so on, they should receive their certificate of application within, well, it's supposed to be immediately, but it might take a couple of days. And then if necessary, you can use their certificate of application using that second website on that last slide. But if they were already working for you before the 30th of June, you do not need to check their immigration status, their eligibility to work. What if they began working for my organisation after the 30th of June? Well, you do need to check their status if you haven't already done so, and you must use the share code to do it. You can no longer use EU citizens' passports or other documents to check their right to work. Again, if they're unable to generate that share code, use that second link, but it's the share code. It's all about the share code at the moment. What if they've applied for a job, but they haven't yet received their status? Can I still use their passport as right to work instead? No, you can't. You have to use that other website that was on the last slide. Don't use passports and ID cards anymore. Okay, what about if someone has applied for a job, but they have not yet applied for their status? They can't work. They're not legally able to work in the UK. They must apply for their status. So the first thing, if they come and they say, I've applied for this job, and you say, do you have a right to work? And they say, here's my passport. And you say, but do you have a share code? And they don't know what you're talking about. If they have not applied, make them apply for this first, because they can't work without it. Okay, what about if someone who works for me or has applied for a job with my organisation has had their status refused? This is a really difficult conversation then that you need to have. If their status has been refused, they're not legally in the UK, unless they're here on a tourist visa. But if you're on a tourist visa, you can't work. So they can't work for you. if they've had their status refused. And then my last question, what if somebody is not from an EU or an EEA country or Switzerland, but they say they have EU settlement scheme status? It's a bit confusing. Well, as we said before, dependents as well. So for example, say that I was from Spain and my husband was from Brazil, he could apply through me. So even though he's from Brazil, he could still have EU settlement scheme status. So yes, you have to believe them and they will have a share code to be able to prove it anyway. Okay, so my last thing that I haven't written anything up here, how do you employ someone who is currently in another EU country? The reason I haven't put anything about this is because, like Sarah said, you're onto the tier system now, and that will be a tier 2 visa. This falls outside of the remit of what GARAS does. We don't get involved in tier 2 employment. You would need to follow the employment visa route, become a sponsoring organisation, so seek advice from an appropriate organisation if you wish to do this and don't know how. Any questions, first of all?
Okay, can I come back in here and say thank you very much indeed, both to Sarah and to Jenny. Jenny, can I just clear one thing on my own mind? You asked the question, what if somebody's working for me before the 30th of June or whatever? I, as an employer, don't need to check, but technically they could be illegally in the country.
Yes.
Where's my accountability and responsibility?
So legally, as an employer, you do not need to check. If you discover that they haven't applied, make them apply. Just get them to apply. Tell them they have to. Unofficially, if you haven't heard it officially, that's fine. But unofficially, tell them. If you hear it officially, sit down with them and go through the application with them there and then you can check it on their certificate of application.
But if you have refugees in the Forest of Dean, if you'd like to work with refugees, there are in fact some in the Forest of Dean. So if you'd like to offer them work, please ask us and we will direct them to you. Obviously, refugees are just like you and me, and if they wish to work, they will find their own work or they'll come on the GEM project. But we have placed refugees all across Gloucestershire, Tewkesbury, and please come.
Wonderful success stories of refugees that have gone into work at the university in all sorts of different professions, from doctors to tailors and it's been remarkable. So the work that GARAS do and the support they can provide for you if you're looking to recruit people at the moment is seriously second to none. So thank you, Sarah. Now this is the final session. So I've got one, that's great. Can we place advertisements on use about posts that are open? Should we send them to GARAS? Yeah, by all means,
yes,
send them
please.
to GARAS and to GEM, and all those details will be sent to you along with the slides following this session.